I was going to record or have recorded my sacrament talk, and that was not possible. I was told by the bishop that that really is not something that the church is in favor of for whatever reason. So I thought what I would do is I would just redo that sacrament talk and provide my message to my loved ones and others who may be interested. Of course, I started out with my conversion story, and the title of this talk is "Truth is Precious," because it certainly has been precious for me my entire life. One of the biggest things that I would say have to say I detest basically is dishonesty, or barking up the wrong tree, or whatever you want to say, in life. As I want to really, really, really try in my life to do the right thing and to be honest and to make sure that what I'm doing is the best that I could be doing. And my conversion story really takes place about 50 years ago, actually a little bit more than 50 years ago, when I was first told about the gospel by an inactive colleague. And he hadn't had a church member or hadn't been to a church meeting for really 10 years. And I was very impressed when he told me that his church, that people still come and visit him. And that was pretty impressive to me to hear such a thing. And I was agnostic and had been for years, even though my dad was a minister. I just had great difficulty accepting Christianity in the sense that it seemed so unfair because so many people never get to hear about Christ. And here I am fortunate enough to hear about Christ, and I can get this wonderful thing, the wonderful message. And the other people, from what I could determine, there is no plan for them. I asked my father one time, he's a great guy, and he said, "Well, Cal, I think there really is something that the Lord is going to do, obviously, for these people, because there's so many billions of them." But I didn't really have an answer for me. I know, and one of the things that I found out when my inactive colleague, a member of the church, gave me the Book of Mormon. I read the Joseph Smith story and read the Book of Mormon from cover to cover. I was very, very much impressed with the idea and getting familiar with the doctrine of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that there are indeed provisions made for people that do not get this message in mortality. That was a huge factor for me in my conversion. But we were tracked it out, and it was about a 2-year journey, and we finally ended up joining the church. And the church, I have to really say, has really been a blessing in our lives. That choice to join the church was a really positive and wonderful things for Claire and for me. But when I joined the church, I had to essentially give up my, for lack of a better word, scientific. I'm not a great scientist, but in junior high and senior high and in college, certainly in college, and in dental school, and then my years after dental school, it was kind of like the thing. Well, the society has progressed. We see all these progressions in medicine and transportation, communication, and so forth. And these are new wonderful things. The old kind of fuddy-duddy things are in our past because we didn't know any better. We didn't have the technology. We didn't have the ability to move on to these higher levels, to progress into these higher levels. And that made sense to me. But then when you join the church, I asked one person, do you really believe in an Adam and an Eve? It's not just like an allegory type of thing. Is that really something you believe in? And I was kind of a little bit taken aback by when the gentleman said, yes, we do believe in that. And the days of creation, so to speak, or the thousands of years of creation. It's a little bit hard. It seemed almost as if I was going back, if you will, intellectually. And that has always been just a little bit of a wound to me. And then recently, I always had a prayer in my heart. Someday, Lord, I would like to know more about things of our creation. I know we have the Bible and the Book of Mormon and all of that, but I would kind of like to know more of the details. Is there really science? Is there really something that you can really find a blending of science and a religion? And about a year ago, I'm so happy to say I became aware of something that is referred to as the universal model. Now, this was work done by, I have to say, an amazing guy. I'll use the term again. The work that he has done with the Lord help, he is very quick to add the tremendous help of the Lord and the Spirit. What he has been able to do, along with his editors and support of his wife and so forth, is just, I would use the word astronomical, because it's just so big in its scope and in its detail that I use the word astronomical. And I don't really think that's an exaggeration. Just to present some things and gather some things for a sacrament talk, most of us know is not the easiest thing in the world if you're really going to be doing that. If you've ever written an article for a journal or for a publication or for school, obviously, in your schooling, papers and so forth, you see the work that's involved. The bibliography alone can be quite a challenging thing, to look at the background of topics and so forth. And what this individual has done, who is a Latter-day Saint, by the way. Now, he doesn't really wear that on his sleeve, so to speak, in his publications, which are two in number. The first one is regarding the earth, and the second is regarding living beings, living entities. And there is a third on the way. Now, each one of these volumes is approximately, give or take, 800 pages, complete with all indexes and indices or whatever. They're really, really, really wonderfully done. And what I love so much about them is that they are written so that you can understand them as if you were a scientist or if you were a layperson. They're not written like some Ivy Tower, station and looking down and using a lot of big words, and unless they are necessary to use the big words, but to make it very understandable. To me, that has been so enjoyable to pore over that first volume, for example. That's really where I've put my emphasis. And it took me a year to do that, believe it or not, because I can't do that full time. But to see what is accomplished in understanding the world and see how things really could and are true. Because the whole idea is, if we are members of a church and we have faith in that church and faith in the gospel, whatever form that gospel might be, those scriptures are true. In our case, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, the Pearl of Great Price, and all of those things. Are those things true? Is the Old Testament true? Is it accurate? Is the New Testament true? Is it accurate? And if you can't reconcile the two, then in a sense is a form of tension, should I say, or disharmony. They ought to coordinate. They ought to fit together. And to me, this is like the balm of Gilead, because the universal model, as assembled by the author and those that support him, is just so wonderfully done, and it's just such an accomplishment. And now the second volume I've touched on some. I'm really looking forward to it because it is in the biological area, which is more in the area of my expertise. But the geology alone, the thing about the earth and the things that you see there, and what evidences of, if any, are there of a universal flood? Well, there's a ton of evidence of a universal flood. A ton of evidence. That's not just some crazy myth. Like if you look up Wikipedia, the first thing that they say in there, and again, I know it's not a big legal document, but still the first thing they say is they use the word myth. Myth. And this is really kind of like what I thought it was. It was a nice Bible story, and all that. And, it'd be a nice bedtime story. But really, what merit did it have? Did it really take place? And there's just a plethora of information in the universal model and in that Earth system first volume. Things which are not appropriate, in a sacrament meeting for me to have gone into in detail, nor am I going to attempt to do so now. But if you just would have an open mind and, as the author says, ask questions and have an open mind, try to connect the dots and that type of thing, it's very, 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 very gratifying to me. And, we use that, the word or phrase, balm of Gilead, which was really coming out of Jeremiah in the 3rd chapter. And I know President Monson used that term in one of his talks, and other general authorities and throughout, other religious leaders use that term, balm of Gilead. And to me, indeed, this has been a balm of Gilead. I know to some people it may not be such an interesting topic as it is for me. But again, I still seek the reconciliation of science and religion, the scriptures and science. If they're true, they should harmonize. They should harmonize. And that harmony, to see that harmony, has been so awfully gratifying to me. This gentleman is, in my opinion, a remarkable Latter-day Saint, a person who had the opportunity and the means somehow to essentially devote 30 years of his life for the pursuit of truth. I know 20 for sure, more than 20, really, really, really intensive, and perhaps even intensive the previous 10, or part-time maybe the previous 10. I don't really know. But I had the privilege of being with that individual for 3 days during a geological tour, and he's just it just exudes to me being a genuine Christian. A genuine Christian. And it's just a pleasure to be around that author, and I had the opportunity to do so. And I highly recommend the Universal Model to you. Talking about things like, for example, now, this gentleman, through experimentation, not theory, first of all, I want to say, as far as technology, there have been tremendous advancements in technology. Tremendous. The things that we see, the things that have been developed in our societies, going back now with the scientific revolution, so to speak, or, industrial revolution, in which you're developing products and so forth. Now, I am not referring to, when I say science, that technology, but we're talking about really you might say natural sciences, the real fundamental sciences, and that has not progressed. Matter of fact, it's been in basically what could be described as the dark ages. Why? Because certain things got promulgated early on that sent it in a different direction. And scientists, many of them, even by recent polls, are known to be, in large measure, atheists or agnostic people. And their bent or their inclination seems to be, and really took place, back in the 1800s especially, started to get away from a theological perspective. Matter of fact, it almost seems as if they intentionally wanted to go away from this old fuddy-duddy things in combination with some of the scientific leaders, many of whom we know as I think it was James Hutton with geology, and then we, of course, we have Darwin and so forth, and the people that carried that torch forward. Uh, it's just nice, so again, soothing for me to see documentation to the contrary regarding that. Not a theory, but actually documentation to the contrary of that. How would it be possible for this gentleman, for example, to make rocks in a day, to make petrified wood in 2 days? Now, we always were told, oh, it takes millennia, or it takes millions of years to petrify things and so forth. Not true. Scientifically not true. And it's done by a combination of temperature and pressure in a hypertherm. And again, we're not going to go into things, but this gentleman is very much attuned with advancements and thinking in applying technology, like being able to develop pressure and temperature due to technological advancements, and then applying it to something as a big a topic as, could wood be petrified? Does it take 1,000,000 years? Or it doesn't? It doesn't. Okay. Where did the water come from for the flood? From the flood. We know when we read in Genesis 7:11, it says that it came from the deep. Well, I don't know about you, but to me that doesn't make a lot of sense on the surface. We do know about the 40 days of rain, 40 days solid of rain, but that would only amount to a few inches, calculations have been made. How did that water come from the deep? There is a very plausible explanation about how that occurred, because this is really not a magma planet, but really is a hydro planet. But we really can't go into that, right? Really choose not to go into that, and it's not appropriate for me to go into that. But anyway, that is, if you would have an open mind, and if you would look at the material, I think you will be, I believe you would be very impressed. With an open mind now, with an open mind. That's absolutely critical. And now we know Noah begat 3 sons. Now, a limited number of people now, with the Lord being very displeased with this earth. A limited number of people, I believe it was 8 on that ark. The 3 sons, the 3 spouses, and Noah and his wife. That it is stated that if you look at genealogical material that has been preserved, it is possible to actually see and follow with DNA evidence, some of which is mitochondrial DNA passed on from the mothers. So you can actually trace back to the time of this period of time. And the earth being, say, 13,000 years old, as opposed to millions of years old. So if you had 7,000 years, which we know a day is said to be 1,000 years, and if you look at that documentation, and there's other documentation of that, but we look at the scriptures and we see that, talked about in the scriptures. And then there would be 6,000 years of human habitation. Okay, so that would be about 13,000 years. Now that seems ridiculous, absurd to many of the so-called scientists, okay? But I submit to you that if you really look over this material, you would see that such a thing is not absurd. Because if you actually were to use historical data and not just casting aside historical information as a mere trivial, inaccurate dispersal of some kind of nonsense, if it would be looked upon historically, radiocarbon dating has its great limitations, great assumptions, and really most of its usefulness, at least as far as I understand, and again, I'm not authority, but I'm only working into understanding it, would be about 5,000 years. So radiocarbon dating and extrapolating and making all these things about millions of years and watching for the deterioration of carbon-14 or the changes of carbon-14 and so forth and so on. It really has many, many, many accuracies about it. And actually, those three sons, them, the three sons of Shem and Ham and Japheth or Japheth. I've heard it pronounced different ways. But if you have the three sons, and then they are all related, but then you have the wives that they married and how they dispersed from a Mesopotamia location and dispersed, not populating in the Ice Age coming across the Bering Straits, or origins of coming out of Africa, but actually dispersing from Mesopotamia and reproducing and really resulting in the Europeans, the Africans, and the Asians. It is very plausible that that was what occurred. Things of that nature is just so interesting to me. And I applaud or really recommend that you really, really, really have an open mind and investigate some of these things. I think you will be very impressed. And that dismisses this 4.5 billion years old Earth, when you're really talking about thousands of years, okay? Now, scientists can identify the parts of a cell, but they have no idea how to make this. And I just think of the wonders. I've always been impressed with the wonders. I used to be an evolution guy across species lines. I used to think, well, we evolved, and I was told that it was billions of years. And I would say, okay, you have random mutations and natural selection. Okay, and I was coming from a purely secular view. But I've always had it, as I've gotten to understand the human body more through study and my training, and then just reflecting out of maturity. When you're mature and you reflect, you can get a perspective you can't have as a young person. And now that I've matured all these years, I submit to you that the complexity is of the human body or other entities, name them, really just don't hold water as far as natural selection and mutation. I know President Nelson one time was posed about evolution, and I think he made a very simple statement: I just cannot accept that. And that's the way I feel. When I think about this human heart that I have that is pumping now and has pumped for all these years, I know that it pumps, really you're talking about 100,000 times a day, roughly. And you think about the fact that there's 35 million of those pumps per year. And that actually in your life, if you do the calculations with someone like, say, November 17th for me, it will have beat 2 million. No, that's not true. Sounds like a lot, right? 2 billion. 835 million times. That would be 2,835 million times from my calculations. Let me say that again. 2,835 million contractions. And there has been no service or lubrication or anything. All you really need for the heart to function is an energy source, which is by itself a miracle. You have salt water, minerals, and oxygen. And that's what this pump runs on that we have in our chests. Now, if that does not seem to be speaking of a higher power, I have difficulty, believing that that's not from a higher power. I used to be able to take it pretty well, but those days are gone for me. And I don't think they will ever return. When surveys that are done have showed that unbelievers, as far as scientists, are in great supply. Believers in science are in very, very short supply. And I think that predisposition to look at things that way has subtly but substantially driven these questions in the directions of atheism. And let's face it, in our world, it's a lot cooler to believe in not having some higher power creating these things. Seems old-fashioned, seems very simplistic, but to me, it is no longer old-fashioned and has been decreasingly believable to me particularly the last 50 years. But Mark Twain had a quote, which I will read for you here, that there is something fascinating about science. One gets such wholesale returns of conjecture out of such a trifling investment of fact. And the author of the Universal Model states, this is a quote right here, that he would like to really bring religion and science together, and coined the phrase religions. Religion and science. Religions. This is a quote from the author. Truth is universal, and by bringing together true science and true religion, we establish a state of religions, a harmonious union wherein mind and heart understand and comprehend nature and its creator. I'll read that again. Truth is universal, and by bringing together true science and true religion, we establish a state of religions, a harmonious union wherein mind and heart understand and comprehend nature and its creator. A harmonious unity, to be exact, a harmonious unity. And that bringing together of science, like a puzzle piece locking into another puzzle piece, is very gratifying, certainly to me, and I think to a lot of people with inquisitive minds, and those that have particularly, not exclusively, but particularly those that have a testimony of the truthfulness of the gospel of Jesus Christ, or have a testimony of the truthfulness of, you name the religion, some kind of higher power, some kind of force that is working in this universe and has worked in this universe. This is another quote from the book, and I'm sorry I can't specify or mention the author's name, but there are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. Two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. And I just find that obviously a rather profound statement, and so true. And I've grown up and matured through the years of my life, and I've really realized just how short life really is. Those of you that are younger, I know you probably feel like I felt when I was younger. And older people would say to me, wow, life is really short. And I used to think and maybe a lot of times I didn't say it, but in my mind and heart I felt, yeah, it doesn't seem to be that short. I got quite a few years ahead of me, hopefully, and they don't seem to be going by that fast. But I can testify to you that life really is short. And when you're young, if you choose to direct your life in a particular way, it may seem important, but not nearly, I submit, as important as when you start to get older. Because if you think about 2 points, when they diverge, when you see between my fingernails, not a very great distance, but if you carry that out through the years, you can see how they diverge as I raise my hands and go out along those trajectories. You see how far it's getting to be now? Well, you do that for years and decades. And then you will find those points can be very, very far apart. So it's very important, I submit to you, as a young person, to seek truth, to not get out there so far that you begin to really wonder whether it's even possible to come to some kind of unity. And I throw that out to you just as an older, more experienced person. Dr. Eben Alexander was a neurologist. I believe he's still living. And he was an atheist, and he had a near-death experience that changed his life. He was actually in a coma, I believe, for 5 days. And he thought he understood the mind very well. A neurosurgeon, I don't know, provided, 10,000 operations or whatever. I don't remember the figure. It could be more than that. And he really thought, here he is, a guy basically, I think he was atheist, but maybe he was agnostic, I don't know. But when he went through that experience, this is one of his quotes. He said, love, and there's a certain reason why he says love with his near-death experience, but he says, love is without a doubt the basis of everything, the single most important emotional truth in the universe, but also the single most important scientific truth as well. And I certainly can see that. And as Latter-day Saints, or just as human beings, you see how important love really is, and how important it is in our daily relationships, in our love, if we're believers, in our Father in heaven, and those of us that are Christians in the wonderful atonement of Jesus Christ, the unfathomable love that Heavenly Father had for us to create us and to give his only begotten Son, and then for his Son to go through agony that is impossible to describe, to take it upon himself, to take that agony upon himself, is just so much speaks of love, 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 love. And I think we should really all be very, very keenly aware of this, especially those that we feel we have the fullness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I just want you to know that I bear my testimony that the scriptures are true. The scriptures are true. They are not fairy tales. They are not some little made-up thing that made people feel good or felt they want to write down and took a lot of liberties with their accuracy. The scriptures are true. And I bear that witness to you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.